All right, so move on to the next segment. I'll be sharing my thoughts on Chris Paul retiring from the NBA. So last week, the news broke that Chris Paul has retired from the game of basketball after spending 21 years in the NBA. Chris Paul is now retired at the age of 40 years old. Honestly, we all knew this was coming, and he already said before the NBA season that this would be his last season. And I'll get on how I think that his botched retirement tour went. But yeah, it sucks, guys, because if you're someone as young as me, you grew up watching and idolizing Chris Paul at the point guard position, one of my favorite players to follow growing up. And as you get older, for our audience that's out there as young as me, as you get older, so do these legends and icons that you watch in sports. They get older, and their time comes to retire from the game of basketball. Father Time is undefeated, and it's Chris Paul's time to go. So it just sucks, but that's just how the way of sports go. So my thoughts of Chris Paul. Honestly, Chris Paul is one of the greatest point guards in NBA history. He was a great, phenomenal floor general, and he did not get the point guard nickname for no reason. I mean, Chris Paul played the point guard position just as good as your favorite all-time players did at the point guard position, like a Magic Johnson, a John Stockton, and several others that were great floor generals at the point guard position. But Chris Paul left it all on the court all those years in the NBA. 12-time All-Star, 11-time All-NBA member, 2006 NBA Rookie of the Year, 2-time Olympic gold medalist, with winning gold medals with Team USA 2 times in the past. And Chris Paul was a great two-way player as well. Not only did he know how to dish out the ball and get his teammates involved, but he also knew how to get steals and be a good defensive player, because he finished second all-time in assists and finished second all-time in steals in NBA history. But the man knew exactly how to play the point guard position. I mean, the pick and roll game was always so smooth with Chris Paul controlling the rock on the court on a nightly basis. He was a very scrappy player, would do anything to get the advantage for his team on the defensive side of the ball. A good playmaker, good spot up shooter, and his leadership. The leadership of Chris Paul will never be forgotten, whether he was on the Clippers, the Rockets, etc. The leadership that Chris Paul left behind was really, really special for a lot of NBA players they shared a locker room with over the years. But unfortunately, Chris Paul had a botched retirement tour. He went back to the LA Clippers to finish his career in LA with the Clippers. He spent a good chunk of his career with players like Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, Doc Rivers, etc. in LA with the Clippers. He wanted to finish his career with the Los Angeles Clippers, but obviously we know the story that happened a few months ago, the fallout between himself and head coach of the Clippers, Ty Lue, that ended the relationship with Ty Lue and Chris Paul, and ended Chris Paul's relationship with the Clippers. He was sent home, and he never returned back to the team. And of course, the Clippers traded Chris Paul to the Toronto Raptors before the NBA trade deadline, and the Raptors wanted nothing to do with him, and they waived him. So Chris Paul took it upon himself to retire, and that just sucks, because one of the greatest point guards of all time should at least deserve somewhat of a good retirement tour, but it was botched, unfortunately. But back to my point about Chris Paul's leadership. In the back end of Chris Paul's career, when he was traded from the Rockets to the Thunder back in 2020, he deserves a lot of credit for what he did with OKC, because when he was traded there, he was brought there to help and develop the young players, and he helped and developed SGA into the player that he is today. His small contributions mean something, and a team that was supposed to do nothing back in 2020, they ended up being a playoff team. The Oklahoma City Thunder were a playoff team. And then the next year, he gets traded to the Phoenix Suns. His leadership helping out with Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton. He helps the Phoenix Suns get to the NBA Finals. Of course, they fell short to the Milwaukee Bucks in 2021. But leadership for Chris Paul actually means something. And I'm going to miss what Chris Paul did for the game of basketball. Obviously, the prime years were well over, but man, Chris Paul was just a difference maker as a player, a difference maker as a two-way player, his leadership on different teams. I mean, the only thing that's missing from Chris Paul's career is, of course, an NBA title. And I think Chris Paul will go down as one of the greatest players of all time to never win an NBA title. You're looking at players like Allen Iverson, Carmelo Anthony. As of right now, James Harden is still one of the best players of all time to never win a ring. Like, there's a long list of all-time greats that never won a ring. You could also throw in Charles Barkley, so many others. But it just sucks because Chris Paul was literally 2 wins away from winning his first and only NBA title when the Suns were playing against the Milwaukee Bucks in the 2021 NBA Finals when they were up 2-0 in the series on the Milwaukee Bucks and then lost 4 straight games. That just sucks because Chris Paul only got to the finals once and never got a taste of that ever again. But the prime years for Chris Paul, we can never forget the prime years. I mean, can you imagine if the prime years that he spent with the Hornets, he could have actually been on a contending team? Like what he did in Charlotte for the Hornets, that was phenomenal. He just had no help. He did everything he could with that franchise, and eventually it was time to trade him, so he got traded to the Clippers. I want to bring up the point, too. Long live David Stern, but he screwed the hell out of Chris Paul because he thought a prime Chris Paul and Kobe Bryant playing together in LA with the Lakers was an unfair trade for both parties and the NBA. But I can only imagine what a prime Chris Paul and a Kobe Bryant would have did in LA with the Los Angeles Lakers. Possibly win a title and possibly been up there in the finals with the Miami Heat's big three of LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh, a team that got there 4 times in that era, in the prime years where CP3 played with the Los Angeles Clippers. But he still had a lot of fun playing with Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, Jamal Crawford, Doc Rivers in LA. They just could never get over the hump when it mattered most in the playoffs. He spent a good time and really in the ending years of his prime playing with James Harden. Well, he was out of his prime, but he wasn't washed. Playing alongside James Harden in Houston, they got so close to winning an NBA title too. And the Western Conference Finals trips just fell short. And yeah, it sucks. But Chris Paul is definitely going to go down as one of the greatest players of all time, never win a ring. But fun fact here to close out the segment, LeBron is actually the last remaining player of the Banana Boat Crew. If you guys know the Banana Boat Crew for basketball, that was a part of a good, fun 4-man group of friends and great legends and icons of Carmelo Anthony, the guy I'm repping, Dwayne Wade, LeBron James, and Chris Paul. And longevity is crazy for LeBron because he's outplayed his peers. And now everybody a part of the Banana Boat Crew has retired other than LeBron James. Small fun fact. But those are my thoughts on Chris Paul retiring from the game of basketball. Chris Paul's legacy will never be forgotten, and he will definitely have a spot soon in the NBA Hall of Fame.